thanks for tuning in. Welcome to my review of my brand new 2018 Husqvarna FE350. Now before we get into the bike, let's talk a little bit about how I ultimately ended up here with this bike. I bought my 2015 Suzuki DR650 brand new off the showroom floor. It was my very first motorcycle. And when I was shopping bikes back then, I knew I wanted something that I could both ride to work, ride on the street, as well as take on forest roads and trails and things like that. So that's kind of really what narrowed that down for me in the DR. And I feel like it's a good compromise between a touring bike and a dirt bike. It's kind of a good middle ground there. And I've loved this bike over the last 3 years. It's got about 4,000 miles on it now. And it's really been a great bike, and it's fulfilled all of my needs up until more recently, when my riding style and what I ride with some friends has changed a lot from what I was riding when I first got that bike. With the trails and things that I've been riding recently, it became apparent that I wanted something that was more lightweight. I knew I wanted to get down in the 250-pound range, and something more nimble with better suspension and more geared towards single track with a lot of technical sections, deep whoops, rocky sections, things like that. I knew that I wanted a bike that was going to be geared towards that right off the showroom floor. I didn't really want to buy something or take this bike and try and make it something that it's ultimately not. Yeah, the DR650 you can do single track on. I've done a lot of single track on it, and it is quite capable, but it's also really tiring to take down some of these single tracks, just trying to move around all that weight. Anytime you fall, having to pick up 360 pounds is always exhausting, and you can only do that so much in a day before you're just done and over it. So that's kind of what narrowed things down for me into more of the Enduro category. I knew I wanted a license plate on my bike still, because I do ride around town. I commute to work sometimes, and I do a lot of forest road riding, as well as commuting from one area in the dirt to another area. So that really brought it down into KTM, Husqvarna, and Beta. And what I had locally that I was able to actually try was FE350, and that's ultimately what sold me on the 350. I loved how the 250 handled, how it felt, but I knew I wanted just a little bit more power out of the bike. And I feel like the 350 is a good middle ground between the 450 and the 500. Yeah, the extra power of the 450 and the 500 would probably be awesome, but on the trail, it's probably more than I am realistically ever going to be able to use, especially on tight technical stuff. And so far I've got about, I've got 230 miles on this and 8.5 hours. Over that time period has really cemented that this bike was the right choice for me. I've loved every single minute of riding this bike, and it has brought new joy to me for riding single track and some of the technical stuff around here, with how nimble it is and how light it is, and ultimately how much more fun it is in the technical stuff versus the DR650. So now let's get into some of the specifics that I like about this bike.
The first one is the power. It's pretty incredible how much power this little 350cc motor can pack. The engineering that went into this is pretty incredible. The fact that it can put out over 40 horsepower is mind-blowing. The electronic fuel injection is definitely not something that I'm used to. I'm used to the carbureted bike. This bike has so much more response than the DR650. It's easier to finesse, and it gets right on it as soon as you hammer the throttle. The other portion about this bike that I like is the gearbox. First gear is really short, and that's great for super technical tight trails. You don't have to feather the throttle near as much as you might on a taller gear. The only downside to the gearboxes in the city, you get into 6th gear really fast and you feel like you're up in the revs. almost anywhere that you're riding it around town, anywhere in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range. Perhaps the thing I like the most about this bike is the suspension. It really just soaks up everything you throw at it, and I'm not used to suspension that is this good. If anybody knows anything about the DR650, the stock suspension on that bike is absolute garbage and probably not even really safe. So coming from that to this is like coming from some old jalopy car to a Mercedes. The WP suspension on this bike is just amazing at soaking up the rocks, roots, whoops, anything in the trail, anything you can throw at it. It just soaks it up and stays planted. It allows you to focus on the riding and picking your line through the trail. Having suspension this good has really been confidence inspiring. It's allowed me to kind of focus more on technique and riding posture and picking faster lines through the trails, as opposed to avoiding certain obstacles that were just sketchy to hit on the DR650. Those are really the aspects of this bike that are the most enjoyable for me and create the largest difference between this bike and my old bike. Overall, in the short period of time that I've had my FE350, I feel like it is an amazing bike, and I have absolutely no regrets in the direction I went with buying this over anything else. There isn't a thing about this bike right now that I want to change, and all I want to do is just get out on the trail and ride more.